No weapon in all of Gundam is as recognizable as the Beam Saber. Being as easy to spot as the Gundam, this small, handheld handle has made a name for itself. And not just for the Federation, or Universal Century, but in Gundam as a whole. So I'm Slothcakes and let's go look at this wonderful weapon. Going back to the original Gundam, to the 1 Year War, the Federation were getting their teeth kicked in by Zeon, and the new type of weapon, the mobile suit. And long story short, the Feddies eventually got their own, and due to having the technology and resource advantage, was able to deck them out with some fancy toys. Introducing the RX-78 line, with the Dash 1 being the prototype, and the Dash 2 the one that everyone's more familiar with. It's overall a very impressive machine, equipped with this new weapon, the Beam Saber, a weapon that when deployed is the size of a two-handed sword that can easily be one-handed or dual-wielded if you want. But an amazing feature is when not in use, it's no bigger than a large flashlight, allowing for easy storage and transportation. This small handle, a bit bigger than the Gundam's hand, sits comfortably above the Gundam's shoulders, with two on its backpack. When drawn, it connects to the mobile suit's hand and the handle emits high-density Minovsky particles, a fictional energy that is an end-all be-all, from fuel, radar jammer, sensor jammer, tech malfunctioner, plot device, and great as a conditioner, but in this case, a weapon. Alongside particles, a eye field would also be emitted, which helps trap the particles. It creates a hollow shell or shield in a way, in a desired shape. Then the Minovsky particles fill in that shape and feed a constant stream. Without the eye field, the particles would just spray everywhere, but when both work together, boom, an active beam saber is made. It works similar to how a beam rifle shoots, with the eye field keeping it intact, but eventually decays and alongside the particles will disperse. However, due to a beam saber still being connected to the device and mobile suit, it gets a constant stream of power, so it doesn't fizzle out. And while iffy, some beam melees have been thrown and kept their beams going for a bit. This is all thanks to E-caps, which are like Minovsky batteries. This allowed the Federation to make mobile suit sized beam weapons, and allow mobile suits to use them without draining their generator dry. Now, what does all this hoopla lead to? Well, an extremely effective melee weapon. This thing rocks. It is awesome. Easy portability, uniform design, the blades are beamed so no maintenance needed, and the beam saber can cut through practically anything with ease, if it's not a other beam weapon, beam treated, or luckily for Zeon, a superheated weapon. The Federation struck gold with this thing, and its impact to mobile suit technology is massive. Not only did the Federation use it as their main melee weapon, Zeon would soon adopt it, and mobile suits as a whole would use it as a standard melee weapon. It would be alongside the Head Vulcans as the most common weapon among mobile suits. Now, they're not without flaw. We can assume they're more expensive to make than a Heat Hawk due to the new technology, and it is basically a giant glow stick, so it's pretty noticeable when turned on. You're gonna be able to spot this thing from a distance, and they do produce a good amount of heat. And if anything goes wrong, either it's damaged or malfunctions, you don't get a beam, so you're just stuck with the handle. Also, this thing can run out of juice, and it will be drained faster if constantly put in strain, and unlike a Heat Hawk, again, the handle is not much use by itself. Now, this isn't too much of an issue due to this barely being depicted. Maybe due to mobile suits don't draw their beam sabers for no reason and have them constantly on, they only use them when they're being used, heavily limiting the power consumption. And when beam sabers are connected back to the mobile suit, it charges them. Also, mobile suits can have multiple, so they can just switch upon each use. So you kinda have to be put in a really specific scenario or go out of your way to run dry. An example would be using them underwater. They get pretty wonky, producing a mass amount of heat, draining the energy significantly higher. Oh yeah, and one more thing, an active beam saber is constantly dangerous, so you just want to make sure you know where your active beam is at all times. You know, you don't want to accidentally touch anything, or anyone. Anywho, the Gundam's beam saber has a power of 0.38 megawatts, and as a quick spoiler, the megawatt rating just means it's stronger. Higher Mega Art rating, stronger the beam saber. You don't need to overcomplicate it, but there could be a problem that if you have a really powerful beam saber, maybe a mobile suit with a very weak generator might have problems operating it. Anyways, back to the Gundam. Being always outnumbered and having weapons with very limited ammo, he relies heavily on the beam saber. And damn, it was effective. In mobile suit kills, I believe Amuro in the Gundam's beam saber scored higher than any other of his weapons. Now, unlike the beam rifle, the beam saber was easily mass produced and given to plenty of mobile suits. Now, to repeat again, because this may be overlooked, its size when deployed is about half the Gundam, but when not in use, it's no bigger than its palm, allowing it to be stored anywhere and everywhere, from its side skirts, back skirt, some have it on the side of its leg Robocop style, the Gym Sniper has it connected to its sleeve, and many, many more. And these are just a few examples of Federation suits during the 1 Year War. And we can keep going. Some eye fields have different lengths, like the Gundam Pixie's beam daggers, and some have different shapes, like the beam javelin forming a ball with 3 prongs. As for Zeon, during the 1 Year War, they had the Gyan beam saber, taking the form of a thick rapier fitting for stabbing motions. Or the Gelgoog's beam naga, a large handle that makes a larger curved blade from each end. I can spend the rest of the day talking specifically about this. They've been put and stored everywhere, and there's just so many beam variants. And I don't mean things like, oh, this one is 0.06 megawatts higher, so it counts as a new enhanced version, and it's stronger. No, I mean things that have a specific difference, either visually, they have some sort of mechanic, some dumb doodad. Example would be like the Aqua Gym, which have sabers that have to make contact with something for the beam to come out so they can be used underwater, or the Gym Striker with a giant ass stick that has 2 beam sabers attached to the end that can form a scythe or a spear. And this doesn't even scratch the surface of different shaped eye fields, like the mentioned beam javelin with its ball and 3 prongs, but after the 1 Year War we get a few more. We have things like the Gyrodoga with its beam sword axe, which can form a sword, a pick, or an axe. Or the Sazabi, which has a 2-sided beam axe, or it can have a wide bottom sword. The list goes on, and while many beam sabers, no matter where you look in the timeline, is gonna be practically the same handle with the blade coming out, it's a beam saber, I do want to highlight a few that have some form of difference, and instead of just picking randomly, why not highlight the main characters of UC, since out of everything I feel like they have a good showing of the weird things they can do, but at no point is this the limit. There are much weirder. With the Gundam already covered, we have the Zeta, with 2 beam sabers on its hip skirt. They're noted to be stronger than normal, and when deployed they're pretty average. However, a neat thing is when he transforms into Wave Rider mode. The handles become barrels for his beam machine guns. They're noted to be slightly weak, so they're not going to be doing any major damage, however they're quite useful for utility purposes. Now we can't forget that both the Zeta's beam rifle and his Hyper Mega Launcher, which is just kind of a big ass beam rifle, can both emit a beam saber out its barrel, just in case you need to stab something real quick while you're shooting. The Double Zeta is a similar case. Him and his beam sabers are goddamn massive. They're so big that he can't fit his entire hand around one, and they're about as big as his forearm. And the beam part is no different, being extra long. Also, when not in use, they fit on his backpack pointing upwards, and they also act as barrels for the beam cannon, and these things pack one hell of a punch. And they also can be used in MA mode similar to that of the Zeta. The new Gundam has a curved blade to it, which is neat, but it can also deploy a small one on the bottom. But interestingly enough, it has a sensor feature that helps conserve energy. The new Gundam's beam saber will deploy the blade when it detects something in its path, i.e. a mobile suit, an object, or another beam. How this works is most likely the eye field is deployed, but when it comes close to something, the Minovsky particles get deployed out. Doing this allows for some heavy energy saving, which with Amuro's track record of always being outnumbered really comes in handy. As for the unicorn, he has 4 beam sabers on him, 2 on his forearms, which is his beam tonfas, and he has 2 additional on his backpack. And we can quickly touch base with things from late UC, and with the advancement of technology we get some interesting things, like the beam shield, a straightforward but advanced piece of tech. Deploying a plane of energy similar to that of a beam saber, this is used for defensive purposes, because a wall of beam energy can block both beam and physical projectiles quite easily. But there's also the Minovsky Drive, which is found on the V2, and this forms the Wings of Light, which are these massive energy wings that deploy from the V2's back, and these things are giant beam sabers. They can be used as offensive purposes, cutting through anything in its path, and also defensive, wrapping around the V2 and acting like shields. Then there's the X1 with the beam Zanber, which is just a really cool looking beam cutlass. And it has an attachment that can turn it into a very powerful beam rifle. Really cool weapon, I love the handle, it has the guard and everything. This right here is peak mobile suit weapon design. But we have to mention the Muramasa, which looks like a giant physical sword, which is really weird for the time. And this thing can be used as a beam gun, which is neat, but the most important thing is its active mode. The Muramasa has 14 beam saber emitters, 7 on each side, and yeah, I feel like you know where this is going. This thing can activate all of them at the same time. So when activated, the Muramasa just looks like it has teeth going around the entire edge, and this thing looks horrifying. And also, again, like the Zanbuster, this is peak mobile suit weapon design. And to keep repeating myself, this only scratches the surface of things we could cover. We could go into much more details on the ones I highlighted, but hopefully this gets the idea of what UC is like, because we have to move into the alternative universes. And to no surprise, they also have beam sabers, and they act similar to however their beam rifles work. But with each universe, they're in a different advancement in technology. They have some sort of made up metal or particles, some better than others, and also, very importantly, Minovsky particles are universal century only, so other universes' beam weapons work completely differently. But at the end of the day, they all still do the exact same thing, so let's highlight a few. For some quickies, let's look at G Gundam, where we have the Master Cloth used by the Master Gundam. It's a cloth-like whip that's used to slice, grab, or smack things. This works because, Master Asia said so. In a similar note, we have the Beam Ribbon, which is used by the Nobel Gundam, but she also has the Beam Hula Hoop. And we cannot forget to mention the Tequila Gundam's Beam Trident. This one's not as noteworthy as the others, but I only get so many chances to mention him, so I gotta do it. If we look at After Colony, Gundam Wing, we have the Death Scythe, which has a beam scythe, and there's also the Epion, which got this massive beam saber with a really cool handle that connects straight to its generator, roiding the hell out the thing. Next, with Auto Domini Gundam 00, we have GN Particles, which like Minovsky Particles do quite a few things, like make beam weapons work. And while there's plenty of cool things to highlight in this universe, let's look at the Exir, which carries both types of melee weapons. He has beam melee, as in his beam sabers, and he carries physical weapons, like his GN sword and GN blades. Then there's Gundam Seed, the Cosmic Era, with their beam sabers consisting of light particles, which are kinda held together by a magnetic field. But this does what you expect a beam saber to do. But interestingly enough, they do have this one neat feature that stands out from the rest, because beam sabers in the Cosmic Era cannot clash with each other, except for that one time. So combat is done differently, which is a neat thing. Then, as a final highlight, in the post-disaster universe, Iron-Blooded Orphans, we don't have beam sabers, or beam weapons, due to nanolaminate armor. This armor is common among mobile suits, rendering beam weapons useless enough that they're not used in mobile suit combat. So you gotta do it the old-fashioned way and beat each other with rocks and sticks. But there are mobile suits like the Hashmal that have them, but they're used mostly for civilian use, so you don't gotta worry about that. And again, we're not explained how beam weapons work in that universe as well. Now, even with those examples, there's still other universes out there, and even with the ones I did highlight, there's still plenty of noteworthy things to talk about, but they're all at the end quite similar. Beam sabers are created by insert reason here, and at the end they're really good at cutting. And while each universe will throw in their own little bit of spice, and with these universes there'll be some odd ones out, and as long as Gundam is a thing, and a new series in a new universe comes out with their own fancy schmancy tech, they're going to have beam weapons. Well, except for that one time they didn't. And it's always a treat to see how the hell they work. Do they even explain how it works? Do they do anything unique? Do they try anything different? Or do they just copy and paste it? Because, well, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Anyways, that's me rambling about the basics of beam sabers. And with this out the way, we now dipped our toes in and absorbed the basic knowledge. We now have a little bit of an understanding, very little, about how beam sabers are in Gundam. And from here we can take various paths. We can either go more into detail, look at something very specific, or venture off and look at something really stupid. Who knows? But like always, and I've said it plenty of times and will continue to say it plenty of times, there's just so much more to cover. So expect more in the future. But till then, if you haven't dozed off yet, thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.